For the past 2 centuries, much of the Western world has been incredibly wealthy, while the rest of the world was not so fortunate. However, there was an incredible economic reversal around the 1970s and 80s, where so-called third world economies began to grow faster than many of their first world counterparts. One of these developing countries was India. The country's GDP has increased roughly 6-fold since 1990, and today is growing by more than 7% per year, considerably higher than the global average of 2.6%. According to a 2017 study, India will hold as much as 15% of the global wealth in the year 2050, surpassing both the United States and the European Union. So how did this happen? Well, economic growth is primarily fueled by 2 factors: how many workers a country has and how much these workers produce. India has an incredibly large pool of working-age people. Out of the country's population of more than 1.2 billion, roughly 65% are under the age of 35. There are also a ton of jobs, due in large part to globalization. Many multinational companies have not only outsourced labor and manufacturing to India, but also marketing, managerial, and customer service jobs. This saves companies money in labor costs and keeps the entire manufacturing process in sync. Outsourcing is a huge contributor to India's growing economy, but there are other factors at play. One is what economists call catch-up growth. This is when poorer countries like India adopt technologies that have already been developed by richer countries, effectively catching up to them. This could be anything from high-speed rail to automated machinery to the internet. For instance, the Indian government recently launched an initiative to provide broadband internet and mobile network services to hundreds of thousands of Indian villages. Another factor is India's free market reforms, which have ushered in less regulation and more foreign investment. The country has benefited from the global slump in oil prices, as it imports 2/3 of its oil. Some politicians, notably President Donald Trump, have pointed to the rapid growth of India and other developing economies as a sign that the US is lagging behind. But the comparison isn't so cut and dry. According to experts, poorer economies tend to grow faster than wealthier economies. Essentially, when money enters a small pool of wealth, the growth will be much more dramatic than if the same amount of money was in a larger pool. The US economy is currently growing at about 2%, and experts say growing at a rate any higher than 5% would be virtually impossible. In fact, the country hasn't grown at that rate since the 1980s, when it was recovering from a recession. There are also fundamental differences in the way the US and India regulate their economies. India has a 6-day work week, few federal holidays, and no legal retirement age for the private sector. And although the country has laws regulating child labor, they're rarely enforced. UNICEF estimates that roughly 28 million children are working in India. This obviously adds a huge amount of production to their economy, although at the expense of human rights. There's no doubt that India's economy is growing much faster than the US's, but these numbers come far from painting a complete picture. Economic growth fails to account for standard of living, work-life balance, and perhaps most importantly, per capita income. The average income in India is still just $1,600 a year, compared to nearly $56,000 in the US. And more than 20% of India's population lives in poverty. India will surely continue seeing an influx of wealth as its workforce grows. However, making life better for those workers is another feat altogether. India's growth is expected to suffer from its recent decision to demonetize much of its currency. To find out more, check out this video right here. Thanks for watching Seeker Daily. Don't forget to like and subscribe for new videos.